Crysis 2, with its big city blocks in New York, that was a challenge.
Experience of Crysis 1 was a jungle, we had the experience of Crysis 2 with the city, and now we could combine it.
Well, it was a launch title, so there were a lot of challenges.
Working on Crysis 2, and you know Crysis 1 is this big game, and then you change one of the core things like beautiful island, which Crytek did with Far Cry, and it did it with Crysis, and now we change it all. We mix it with city. That was really challenging.
After doing Far Cry and Crysis 1, there was a bit of a fatigue when it comes to jungle environments, as you can imagine, so we explored areas outside of that.
Yeah, the impressive pre-production with all the creative freedom, I would say, exploring options, then shifting the project in one direction, which became, the New York as a setting.
New York is the world city in a way, right? So if something bad happens to New York, it's really, really, really a big deal, right? Like the alien invasion, and then you see alien ships over New York, the world is affected by it. It's not just this remote island somewhere. It's actually now the entire world is being affected. So you kind of see a new level of escalation happening in the Crysis universe at that time. And that made sense to kind of pick something as signature as New York.
There was a field trip, right? And then the field trip, they picked a few people, key people, okay, in New York. And for me, we didn't participate to the field trip back in the days because someone thought it would be way more useful to send the lead coder. Maybe that's not what I record. The lead coder was flying around with a helicopter in New York, but yeah, whatever.
We spent more than a week there just trying to capture the essence of New York. So we spread out, took tons of pictures, we archived them. When we came back, it was a long process of sorting everything out, only to realize that a few weeks later, Google has released Google Maps, and New York was the first city. I mean, it wasn't completely wasted. It was really important that we've been there and, really understand the scale of the city and the essence.
Crysis 2, with its big city blocks in New York, that was a challenge, because at first it doesn't give you much organic space. You always have this grid, and you can't really break away from that, apart from like Times Square. That has some shapes that are interesting, but the rest is like you gotta look for cool locations and really try to use destruction or something that breaks up this rather monotone space.
That was, I think, the most challenging part, having an open or semi-open world game and trying to squeeze that into an urban environment. That took a while in order to get there.
So you do a bit of block out for spaces that are interesting, you do a bit of puzzle testing, how can you engage the player in the world, how to use the weapons, how to use nanosuit, how to use the abilities, and that was something we did quite a long time until we really get hands on actual levels.
Everything was cinematic driven, having that choreographed sandbox way more, where okay, here's a small little bubble, you do your thing, and then you have these, these moments where you can, celebrate these epic moments. That was a little bit different, I would say, compared to the previous Crysis title.
The objective of Crysis 2 was a high production value experience. So we want to use basically methods from the blockbuster films and apply them in games like collaborations with Hans Zimmer. And we were lucky because Hans Zimmer was born close to Frankfurt, which gave us some local bonus, I guess, because getting him on a game, it was not just about money, actually. It's also about interest. But for us, it was very good. It was very exciting.
And with deferred rendering, we were able to throw a lot more light sources in there, and with cool lens flares and that stuff. So night missions became a lot more sci-fi, with that cool glow and lens flares and aliens walking around and stuff like this.
Crysis 2 did have a long development time because we did a couple of things for Crysis 2 that we didn't have to worry about kind of for Crysis 1, which was that we also wanted to kind of explore the console space.
It was the first game that we have released on consoles, and that was just challenging because we were not used to this.
And knowing that visual expectation and all that stuff, I mean, for a console was quite tricky to pull off.
Plus also we went into a different biome. So the whole thing had to move into the next generation, allow consoles at the same time, and deliver a kick-ass game.
We put a lot of effort into optimizing the environments and making sure only the things are rendered that really need to be rendered, and optimizing assets and textures and whatnot, and memory.
We had like two main game designers in the core team. I was owning the weapons, I was owning the arsenal and the nanosuit and making that piece work. And the other designer was working on the AI, was working on the level challenges, things like explosive barrels or specific bosses. So it kind of worked very nicely for us because we obviously had to collaborate a lot and interact, but like I was always take the advocate for, okay, how can I help the player? And then my counterpart was basically saying, like, how can this be a challenge for the player? How can we create interesting gameplay? Because it's not easy to just run through this area.
That is the beauty of Sandbox, I would say, right? The tool pipeline, Flowgraph, after the scripting tool back in the days, allowed to try out different things. Not just level design, also game mechanics. The rope gun, right, that we prototyped at one point, which became something like a special weapon. We created puzzles around that, right? What could we do? But then someone said, okay, maybe it's shifting all the attention from the nanosuit to something else, that special weapon. That's why it wasn't fitting necessarily the direction, and we stepped away from that kind of thing.
With Crysis 2, it was the first time at E3 for me personally. So that was also just a very memorable moment again, like kind of seeing like how even people talked about the first one and kind of compared it, and there was still like the benchmark for whether it runs on a particular system.
The level of expectation from the inside, but also from the outside was, I mean, just insane, right? Everyone, okay, Crysis on stage, E3, that must be a hit.
I'm just proud of the results in general. Like from the moment when you are in New York and you're imagining how the game could be like, and then seeing the final product, that is just super cool to have experienced this, you know, from the beginning to the end. That was amazing, yeah. After Crysis 2 came Crysis 3. It was there was not a lot of time in between.
The pre-production there was quite focused. We had some strike teams, collaboration with coders, you know, quite mixed teams with all skill levels, and everyone was tasked to explore opportunities within specific topics.
That we now had a proven technology base on console, we could focus on the content again, because we didn't have to overcome the same technical problems. So one of the big things we wanted to do for Crysis 3 obviously is go back to some of the pieces that we kind of lost from Crysis 1 to Crysis 2 based on those limitations. So for example, we wanted to open up the world a little bit more. We wanted to give the player more sandbox. So we could be really creative in trying to push the boundaries of what we had and expand on that versus having to even make it run in the first place.
The experience of Crysis 1 was a jungle. We had the experience of Crysis 2 was the city. And now we could combine it. We could combine vegetation and city and create a new scene from it.
We tried to mimic nature with urban elements. So there was a river, there was a canyon, there were fields and islands, for example.
There was also this concept of the dome that goes over the whole level, right? That was very cool, and it's just this blend of these two different styles and the interesting interplay that they have.
It was kind of my dream project when you would have given me a team back in the days and say, here's your art team or your game team, and do whatever you want with that, and I would have done an overgrown city. So that was perfect for me. I had the chance to do my dream project.
Just opening up that sandbox more, just intrinsically gave people so much more to explore and play on their own. So you just need to give them the building blocks, and they kind of come up with some really interesting ways of how to tackle a specific combat scenario, for example.
That was really challenging from an artistic point of view, because it requires a lot of work, it requires a lot of concept art, it requires a lot of iterations, and it was difficult to do, but we had this well-oiled machine back then. It was almost the same team as Crysis 2. The team was just working like super well together. The level designers with the environment artists, with the coders and so on.
because of the close collaboration between the level designers and the game designers. It allowed us to position some really cool weapons that were very, very closely linked to what would happen in the level, but also then the requirements of the stories.
Magazine loaded. Weapon system online. Weapon system.
There was a point in CryEngine 3 when they introduced voxel lighting. So for me, as an environment artist, my assets live by light. And before that, the light in shadows was always very flat and your assets looked just not good enough.
At the time, I managed to push finally into the engine, the Swoggy. It was kind of sitting maybe a year in development, in like attempts to come to the engine, and then we finally managed to push it basically into the engine.
And once they introduced voxel lighting, we had a more differentiated shadow lighting. So the deeper it gets, the darker the shadow gets. And that was a very good point. Once they introduced that, everything looked so much nicer and so much more real, and that was a huge win.
That was a bit messy. Maybe you need this.
I was playing a lot of Team Fortress 2 at that time, and one of the things I was really, really enjoying was playing as the sniper class, but using the bow, which means that you cannot play very aggressively because it's a shorter range. And I really, really enjoyed it. And I thought, like, yeah, there has to be some room also in Crysis for like something like a bow. So we kind of got together with one of the main weapon guys we had back then, and we kind of like thought about like how cool would it be like having a really cool modular folding composite bow that you kind of like bring and carry along. And it very quickly, when we were trying to prototype it and play with it, it turned out to be like a pretty cool thing to do. It's like it became a signature weapon. And the most rewarding moment for me in Crysis 3 development was seeing the first concepts of our box art. And it was the nanosuit standing with a bow. It was like, yes!
It was a really, really great experience. It was probably the smoothest production till today. It was less than 2 years, 14 months, 60 months, something like that, yeah. It's pretty fast.
Gritty, realistic first-person shooters is exactly where I want to be, and definitely felt like a dream come true. I mean, I was a Crysis fan already. I played both the first and the second game, and I liked the universe very much, and the freedom, and just raising the bar and pushing the technology, you know, this mindset of really like, good is not good enough, we really want to reach something higher.
I joined Crytek pretty much at the end of Crysis 3, like the last 4 or 5 months or something. So I was mostly on the core systems team, working with the guys, trying to get most out of Crysis 3 as possible on the CPU side.
Oh yeah, of course. I mean, I had played Crysis. That was one of the big games that I really, really enjoyed during my studies, and that obviously got me thinking about, hey, making games would be cool.
Every game which we are doing has to offer innovation, has to offer something new. And we achieved it with Far Cry, we achieved it with Crysis, and we also want to achieve it as a launch title for Xbox with Ryse.
We all know like Roman gladiators movies, and we used this as a base, and from research we knew exactly in which direction we wanted to go for the combat.
For Ryse we took a more linear approach, but we went very crazy with performance capturing, with facial expression, and also the detail to the world, to the environment was very important.
Ryse was a parallel project. Obviously, we kind of built up a team for in parallel to working on the Crysis titles, but also it was assigned as a launch title for the Xbox One.
Pushing the quality of the game is constant on your back of your mind. You are always playing the game, you're implementing a feature, you play it, you iterate on it, and every time you look at it, you see some little details that you would like to improve.
There were a lot of challenges, basically just to get the quality we wanted and to get the performance we wanted. We knew we wanted to push the boundaries on what the visuals were, and we kind of had to make this fit into the budget on that console.
I mean, the classical stories, you move from like 256 megabytes of RAM all of a sudden to, I think it was 4 gigabytes. But it only took probably a month until we were already out of memory on the 4 gigabyte area as well, considering that we shipped games like Crysis 3 with like 256 megabytes.
In the beginning, we were like all very impressed by how much the hardware could do, but we then pretty quickly started to realize, oh yeah, you still need to be a bit careful.
There was a lot of challenges. Ryse memory was trying to figure out where all the sudden memory got lost by accident. I think at some point there was realization, hey, we have a 4K eye texture because Cinematics team was using this, but it never was switched back. So therefore, all of a sudden, the guy had a 4K eye texture, although you could never see him.
I took over a level. This was the night level, was the being in the forest, so I could do my forest thing again. Yeah, and there I took over because the level was in a very rough state. Basically started a lot of stuff from scratch again and then worked together with a level designer on this level.
For my part, I support a little bit on the multiplayer side. It was mostly about like encounter designs in terms of like the waves of enemies. Like think of the multiplayer of Ryse to be an arena.
And in that Colosseum, we would exchange these tiles or these setups that are in there on the fly.
You always had a theme, and then you were thinking about what could be, swapped out, and then scripting the encounters was more on the technical side and trying to squeeze something out of modules.
Which moving pieces that kind of reassemble and they give you new challenges. And then we have the enemies that you would have encountered in the campaign, and they come at you in certain waves to kind of like overcome. It was a nice small co-op addition to the core game where you could just have a friend join in and you can just bash around a little bit, have some fun.
Yeah, that's where we created just content within the Colosseum, and it was surprising how much ideas in the end you come up with the same space.
Game developers are always passionate about their games. It doesn't matter the company size, project-wise. This is something probably that the industry has in common in different companies. But special about Crytek is it's not just a company. It's like working with friends on your game and working together to deliver the best possible game one can dream of.
The tech demos are usually done to demonstrate technologies and also to test the waters, basically. What else can be done?
The coolest memory here at Crytek was the moment of building the climb.
There were lots and lots of iterations about like how colorful and how crazy the dinosaurs could look like.